Hi everyone. In this lesson, we're going to cover basic scene setup. By setting things like units, layers, and default render early in the pipeline, we won't have to worry about it later on. We'll have layers that manage our scene if we have a lot of parts, which we will with a locomotive model. Units, we want to have units that are realistically scaled so that when we light and render later on, the model reacts well with GI or whatever else may be in the scene. So first thing we're going to do is go to Customize, Unit Setup, and you see it's set to generic units. I just have a preference for inches, so I'm going to click on US Standard. You have all these different settings. I do prefer decimal inches just because for me, I can do math really quick if I need to know scale or whatever. You know, the size of things is easy for me to figure out with decimal inches, so that's my preference, so set it there. If you want centimeters, whatever you're comfortable with, just set it there and work with that. System unit setup, I'm going to go there, make sure that system unit scale 1 unit equals 1 inch, which it does, so that's okay. And okay again. So now the units are set. Let's go to rendering. We're not going to cover much rendering in this tutorial, but we're going to go to render setup. And you see, I think we're set at scanline. There it is. So if we go to common, scroll down to the bottom, we can assign a renderer. Now, I work a lot with V-Ray. So I'm going to go in here. And from this list, we have iRay, Mental Ray, Quicksilver, V-Ray Advanced. We have V-Ray RT and the View File Renderer. I'm going to select V-Ray Advanced and OK. And you see now that V-Ray tabs are available, so when I want to render later, everything's ready to go. So we can close that out. Next, we're going to go to the Layer Manager, Manage Layers, and we're just going to set up some layers so that when we want to organize our scene, or if someone picks it up later in the production, once you're done modeling, a lot of people may work with this, so you want to have this organized so that if you're not available, you may be out of the studio by this point, someone else can just go into the scene and look at the layers and know that they can select, hide, just manage the scene in general. So let's go to this, create new layer, click there. Let's call this one chassis. And that's going to be the layer we build the chassis of the train on. And another layer. The next layer we will call boiler. That's the main body of the train where they put the coal. Another layer. We'll call this one cabin. That's where we'll build a cabin later on. Another layer. We're going to call this one hardware. And enter. The hardware layer, we may just build some bolts and things that we repurpose a lot and store them there. Or even later in the scene, we're going to have a lot of bolts and rivets and things along the surface of the train. This is a great way to manage those models because there's going to be plenty of them. So let's make one more layer. And this one we will call blueprints. And that's where we're going to put our guide image to build the train. So let's select that layer for later on. You can turn freeze on too. For now, I think we have all the layers we need set up, so you can close out the layers. And that's it. I mean, now we have our default renderer set, our layers, our scale, and we're ready to begin and start modeling and have the confidence that everything that we've set up is ready and we don't have to think about it later on. It's a great idea to do this early in the pipeline. As soon as you start working, set these things up so that later on, whoever takes over is confident that everything is set, scale is ready, they can start to render, and if they need to scale something, they can do it from the original size as opposed to guessing at how big you built the model or things like that. So there we have it. That's the first lesson. Scene setup, which is very important. We're going to cover setting up the background image. This is the image you're going to use to model your train. It's a blueprint, so what we want to do is go into our layers, manage layers, click on that. It's also a good idea after the initial setup, which we did earlier, to save your file. You can click here on this little diskette It'll save. I already saved it as setup. You can also save as. There's a whole list of options for saving as. Might be a good idea to save iterations because sometimes you have crashes. You don't know if it's going to happen. So by saving iterations, if you were to have a crash on your current file, you can revert back to an older file. And it's also a good idea to know where your auto back directory is, because sometimes you can lose a file in the process of working and go to your 3ds Max auto back file and recover some information. It may be very helpful. So just keep that in mind as you work anywhere you work, that iterations are a good thing if you have the disk space to support that, and auto back can oftentimes really save you some effort. In your preferences, you can set how often it auto saves and auto backs. If you set that to too frequent, it may interrupt your workflow with a heavy scene. If you have like a scene with a lot of objects, it can be kind of annoying if it saves it every 5 minutes as you're working. So find what works best for you and use that as a way to go. Okay, so back in the blueprints. Earlier I had this frozen. There was a little icon here for freeze. We're going to unfreeze that right now. And we can hide the layers, close it out. And then we're going to select our left viewport. We're going to maximize that with Alt and W. And with Alt W, we now have the left viewport as our maximized viewport. I'm going to click on a plane primitive in the command panel, create a plane. We're going to drag out one. There are dimensions along the right where it says parameters. We're not totally concerned with that right now. So now you have a plane in your viewport. And if you select the move tool, come down here, you'll see the space X, Y, Z position. We're going to zero those out by right-clicking these arrows. And now we're at the origin. If you were to hit F3 for wireframe, that means that the center of this plane corresponds with the center of the world space where these black lines intersect, which is 0, 0. It's a good idea to do that right now. And we're probably going to move that later, to be honest. So now with the plane created, we're going to hit M for Material Editor. That's the default hotkey. And I'm going to go down here in the bottom right corner, pick a new material. I'm going to leave it at standard even though I'm using V-Ray. It works fine. It actually, I prefer for blueprints using standard because I have some options that I can adjust. In a diffuse slot, we have a little checkbox that says none. We're going to click that. And then in the standard rollout, we're going to click the bitmap, double click it. And then I have some files which will be included with the lesson that I created so you can use them as reference. And I have a loco mixed reference file, which is on my desktop in this case. You would navigate to whatever directory you have it in. I'm going to open that, and we'll see that the material editor, the preview, the ball, has the texture on it now. And we're going to apply that to our plane. The plane is still selected, we can see. Assign material to selection. And you see it's gray, which is not really helpful. So if you go over here in the material editor, you have show standard map in viewport. And we're going to click that. And you see, wow, there it is. There's the blueprint. Now the thing is, it's probably a little stretched because I don't know how big this plane is. So what I'm going to do is convert that plane to an editable poly. And the image is still there. And I'm also going to add a UV map, UVW map. So I added that to the stack. You see it's on top of the stack. And now what we're going to do is in the parameters, we can roll down and there's a bitmap fit. If we click on that button and we pick the same image that we're using as our texture, which is right here, local mixed reference, and we open it, well, what happens is the UV gizmo is now scaled to the actual image. So this is no longer stretched. You can see we have some repeating past the edges though. It's not a big deal. So what we're going to do is, with that still active, we're going to go down to Edit Poly and click on the plus sign. And we're going to go to Edge. And you see it kind of changed the blueprint. We don't want that to happen. So if you turn on Show End Result On Off toggle, you'll see that it now matches again. And we have that little bit of extra, like repeat on both ends. So we're going to select this edge. And because we're in the Show End Result, we're going to get a different look. It's yellow and orange. But you see the edge is yellow here. And I'm going to hit Alt and L to loop that selection. So now all of these edges are selected. And by moving the gizmo, I'm just going to crop off that little bit of repeat. So there, that's done. I'm going to do the same at the other end. Select an edge, Alt L, move it in. Okay, there's no more repeat. And now that is scaled to the background image I created. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's scaled properly. If we zoom in a little, we'll see that I have this one wheel selected, and it's 57 inches in diameter. That's based on reference I found, and that's the scale. And right now I'm guessing it's not 57 inches around. So what I'm going to do is create a new mesh. I'm going to go into the Create panel. I'm going to use a cylinder, and basically at the center of the wheel, it doesn't have to be perfect right now, I'm going to click and drag out, and on the right where the parameter values are, you'll see there's like 14, 15, 16 inches and a height value. I'm just going to make a little height. Okay, and that doesn't matter. We're really worried about the radius of diameter. So the radius is not the diameter. The diameter of the wheel is 57 inches. So the radius needs to be half of 57 inches, which if we do the math is 28.5 inches. So now when I change that value, it's going to get really big in your viewport. There it is. And what we could do though is hit Alt and X, and now we have it. It's roughly centered to the wheel, and it's telling us the actual scale that the wheel should be. So let's deselect the cylinder and select the background image, which is done. Use the scale tool. Let's scale it up. And then if you hit W, you have the move tool you can access. Let's move it back so it's kind of roughly where it needs to be. Okay, and let's hit R for scaling again. That's the default hotkey. And W. Okay, and now if I line that up, it's close. Get a better alignment. And up a little, roll in. Okay, let's just scale that up a touch more on the blueprint. Make sure the blueprint's selected, not the wheel or the cylinder. I'm going to roll that up a little bit. And now when I move, I feel like that's about right. And it is. So now what I'll do is select the cylinder. Let's delete that. That was just a reference object for scale. And if you want, you can go to tape just to make sure that I'm telling you the truth. And if you start the tape here and go to the other end, it should be roughly 57 inches. Let go. If you look over here at length, the tape measure is telling us it's 57 inches. So we can delete that tape measure. We can select and delete also the reference object. And now we know that our blueprint is both scaled correctly to the background image for aspect ratio. It's not stretching in either direction. And it's also scaled properly for the diameter of the wheel, which is 57 inches. Now it's no longer at the point of origin, but that's an easy fix. We can go to the move tool, which is active for me. You see X is at 0, but Y and Z are not. We're going to right click those. And now you can see that it's at the point of origin. Now because the train image is a little up on the blueprint, the wheel line is not perfectly aligned with the ground line, but we can always fix that. So let's do that right now actually. I'm going to go to the top viewport. I'm going to zoom out a little bit, and I'm going to make another plane. So we'll go to the Create Geometry, Standard Primitives. We're going to get a plane. And you can see the outline of your blueprint right here from the top view. Let's just make a ground plane. Just like that. And now let's hit P for perspective. Alt, middle mouse button, you can rotate that now. And we're in perspective view. And now let's get the move tool. Let's select the blueprint again. Let's shift it down so that the wheels kiss the ground plane. And zoom in a bit so you can get a really good look. See, mine are a little lower. They look good from far, but now, right around there, they look good. So now we know that the wheels are scaled. They're positioned properly. They're at the origin, so that they'll be anything we put at the ground level will be below the train. And it's a good place to start. You have your blueprints scaled, positioned, and ready to go. The ground plane you can keep or lose. You can put it on a layer where you know later on you get to it. For me, I think I'll just make a new layer. Let's do that, and we'll just call it ground plane. I use underscore a lot. You don't want spaces in your names. Enter. And now I can either hide it, which is good, or we could freeze it. If you freeze it, keep in mind you have to set the object property so it does not turn gray if it has an image mapped to it. And now you'll see that I'm on the ground plane layer as an active layer. I want to go back to the blueprint layer. So I'll just click on it, click where the little square is. It's the active layer again, and we can close this out. So now, let's save this file, of course. Hit the save button. Your blueprints are set. You have reference images. In some cases, you may have a front, side, left, right, top blueprint. You just want to create planes that align to the correct view corresponding to the blueprint. So if you have a front blueprint, you want to make sure that the front view lines up with your front viewport and scale-wise matches the side views or whatever you may have. And that's about it. This is ready to go, and in the next lesson, we're going to start modeling some of the parts of the train. Thanks.